The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. It had seen wars begin and end. It had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. It had heard speeches that changed the course of history. But in all those long years, it had never known a silence quite like this one. High Counselor FailedHFY noticed it first. She was an old creature by the standards of her people, the Mavani collective. Her 4 eyes had grown sharp from centuries of watching, reading, and understanding. And right now, all 4 of those eyes were fixed on 3 empty seats. The human delegations platform stood abandoned. There was no warning. There was no formal letter of withdrawal. There was no angry speech or dramatic exit. The 3 chairs that belonged to Earth's representatives simply held no one. They were empty. And they were cold, as if no one had sat in them for a very long time. FailedHFY felt something twist in her stomach. She turned to her aide, a young Morvani named Kethra, and spoke in a low voice. "When did the humans leave?" Kethra checked the records on her datapad. Her face grew pale. "Their ship departed at 3 in the morning, High Counselor. They filed no flight plan. They gave no explanation. And their quarters? Empty. They took everything. Every personal item. Every piece of equipment. It is as if they were never here at all." FailedHFY sat back in her seat and tried to process what she was hearing. Ambassador Daniel Carter had represented humanity in this chamber for 7 years. He was a quiet man, soft-spoken and patient. He never raised his voice, even when others insulted him. He never lost his temper, even when the debates turned ugly. He simply sat in his chair, took notes, and waited for his turn to speak. His aides were the same. Katie Morrison was young and bright, always eager to help with translation problems or cultural misunderstandings. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Holt was a military man, stern but fair, who had earned the respect of many soldiers from other species through his skill and his honor. And now they were gone. All 3 of them vanished in the night like ghosts. FailedHFY ordered a full investigation. Within the hour, she had her answers, and those answers made her blood run cold. The humans had left behind only one thing. It was a small data chip placed carefully on Ambassador Carter's desk. The chip contained a message of just 2 words: "We understand." That was all. No explanation, no demands, no threats. Just those 2 simple words, and then the reports started coming in. Human merchant vessels across the galaxy were returning to Earth space. They were not rushing or panicking. They were simply packing up their goods, saying polite goodbyes to their trading partners, and flying home. Human engineers working on joint projects with other species were doing the same thing. They finished their current tasks, handed over their notes, and left. Human doctors serving in medical exchanges on distant worlds were telling their patients goodbye. Some of them had tears in their eyes as they walked away. Human military observers attached to Allied fleets were requesting immediate transport back to Earth. They offered no reasons. They just wanted to go home. It was happening everywhere, all at once. It was peaceful. It was orderly. And it was absolutely coordinated. Someone had given an order, and every human in the galaxy was obeying it. Counselor Drathmok of the Corvan Empire was the first to laugh. He was a large creature, covered in thick armored plates, with mandibles that clicked when he spoke. His people were warriors, proud and aggressive, and they had never liked the humans. "Good riddance," he said, his voice grinding like stones rubbing together. The young species has finally learned its place. They have run home to hide behind their little planet. A few other counselors laughed with him. The Zethrai delegate made a joke about human cowardice. The Voshkan representative suggested that humanity had finally realized it, was not ready for galactic politics, but FailedHFY was not laughing. Neither were the elder members of the council, the ones who had lived long enough to study humanity's short but Remarkable history. She looked at Elder Giovanni of the Celestine Accord. The ancient being glowed with soft light, her form shifting and flowing like a living aurora. She had lived for 3,000 years. She had seen species rise and fall. She had voted to admit humanity to the Council just 40 years ago, and she had watched them carefully ever since. Giovanni was not laughing. Her glow had dimmed, and her form had grown still. She looked afraid. Vextari turned to Ambassador Velric of the Thascian Union. His crystalline body usually sparkled with inner light, but today that light was flickering with distress. He caught her gaze and slowly shook his head. "This is wrong," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "This is very, very wrong. What do you mean?" she asked. "The humans do not run from fights," Velric replied. "I have studied them. I have worked beside them. They are stubborn beyond reason. They hold on to causes long after other species would have given up. They do not retreat. They do not surrender. And they certainly do not disappear in the middle of the night without a single word of protest." Vextari felt the cold twist in her stomach grow worse. "Then what are they doing?" Velric's crystal form flickered again. "They are making a statement. They sat through yesterday's session. They watched us debate. They asked to speak, and we denied them. They asked again, and we denied them again. They asked a third time, and we told them to be silent." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy with something that sounded almost like grief. "They were always willing to fight for their place among us. They argued, they negotiated, they pushed back against every insult and every slight. But yesterday, something changed. Yesterday, they stopped fighting." Vextari stared at the empty seats. "Why would they stop?" "Because they realized the truth," Velric said. "They realized that no matter how hard they fought, no matter how much they gave, we were never going to see them as equals. We were never going to treat them as true members of this council. And so they made a choice." "What choice?" Velric turned away from her, his gaze fixed on the platform where Ambassador Carter had sat for 7 years. Patient and quiet, and hoping for something that was never going to come. "They chose to stop caring what we think of them," he said. "And that, High Counselor, is the most dangerous thing a human can do." Across the chamber, Drathmok was still laughing, celebrating the departure of the species he had always despised. He did not notice the looks that the elder counselors were exchanging. He did not see the fear growing in their ancient eyes, but Vextari saw it. And for the first time in her long life, she wondered if the council had made a terrible mistake. The empty seats stared back at her, and they had nothing more to say. The emergency session was called 6 hours after the humans disappeared. 17 of the 23 council species sent their most senior representatives. The chamber buzzed with the sound of translator fields working overtime, turning a dozen alien languages into words that everyone could understand. Vextari stood at the central podium and waited for silence. It took longer than usual. Everyone was talking, whispering, arguing about what had happened and what it meant. Finally, she raised her hand, and the chamber grew quiet. "We must address what occurred at yesterday's session," she said carefully. "The proposal regarding human territorial restrictions was entirely reasonable," Drathmok interrupted. He did not wait for permission to speak. He never did. The humans breed too quickly. They expand too fast. They were taking over, and they needed to be stopped before they upset the balance of power. Several counselors nodded in agreement. The Zithrani delegate clicked her approval. The Voshkan representative thumped his tail against the floor in support, but Elder Giovanni rose from her place, and everyone fell silent. When a being of 3,000 years wanted to speak, even Drathmok knew to keep his mouth shut. "Let us be clear about what we proposed yesterday," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. We voted to restrict humanity to 12 star systems. 12. They currently live in 37 systems, with legal claims to 60 more through colonization treaties that they negotiated fairly and signed in good faith. They negotiated too well, Drathmok growled. They tricked us. They followed every rule we gave them, Shovani replied. They read our laws. They studied our customs. They learned how to work within our system. And when they succeeded, we decided that was unacceptable. She turned to face the full council, her glowing form growing brighter. 16 species voted yesterday to strip humanity of legally obtained territories. 16 of us looked at a species that had done nothing wrong and decided to punish them for being too good at the game we taught them to play. The chamber was silent. No one moved. Ambassador Velric spoke next. His crystal form was still flickering with distress, and his voice was heavy. I watched Ambassador Carter during the vote. I watched his face as name after name was called, as species after species voted to take his people's homes. He paused, and something that might have been shame crossed his features. He asked to speak. 3 times, he raised his hand and asked for permission to address the council. 3 times, he was denied through procedural votes. We did not even let him defend his people. We did not give him the chance to argue his case. Standard practice for junior species, Drathmok said dismissively. They have to earn the right to speak. They've been members of this council for 40 years, Velric shot back. They have served on more joint missions than any other species. They have volunteered for the most dangerous assignments. They have saved lives across 100 worlds. How much more do they have to earn? Drathmok laughed, a grinding sound that echoed through the chamber. They are children. They have existed for barely a heartbeat compared to the rest of us. Let them prove themselves for another 1,000 years, and then we can talk about rights. Shovani's glow dimmed to almost nothing. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. And that is exactly what they understood. The chamber went quiet. They understood that no matter what they do, no matter how long they serve, we will never see them as equals. They will always be the young species, the newcomers, the children who need to be managed and controlled. They sat in this chamber for 40 years, believing that if they worked hard enough and gave enough, they would eventually be accepted. Yesterday, we showed them the truth. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every delegate. We showed them that their service means nothing. Their sacrifices mean nothing. Their good faith means nothing. We showed them that the moment they become inconvenient, we will turn on them without a second thought. The Marvani delegate from the agricultural world stood up. His name was Vernash, and his face was twisted with worry. We need the humans, he said bluntly. My people depend on the crops their scientists developed. Without human agronomists, our harvests will fail. We cannot feed our population. Then perhaps you should have thought of that before you voted to take their homes, Shovani said coldly. Vernash flinched. He had indeed voted for the restrictions. So had most of the counselors in the room. The Thashan medical representative spoke up next. Our hospital ships are already struggling. Human doctors volunteered for postings that no one else would take. Plague worlds, radiation zones, active battlefields. They went where we were too afraid to go. Now those stations are empty. People are dying. Let them die then, Drathmok snapped. We do not need human charity. We survived for thousands of years before they came, and we will survive without them. Will we? The voice came from an unexpected source. Grand Admiral Kethrix of the Celestin Fleet stood up, his luminous form crackling with anger. My monitoring network is going dark. Sector after sector is losing coverage because human engineers were the only ones willing to maintain those systems. Do you know what happens when we cannot see what is coming? Ships get lost. Colonies get destroyed. Threats go undetected until it is too late. Drathmok waved a dismissive claw. Assign new engineers. We tried. No one wants the job. It is tedious work, lonely work, thankless work. The humans did it anyway because they believed in being useful. They believed in being part of something greater. Kethrix's voice cracked, and we repaid them by voting to steal their worlds. The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. For the first time, the reality of what they had done was beginning to sink in. Vexthari spoke slowly. We should send a delegation to Earth. We should apologize. We should offer to reverse the vote. No. Shovania's voice was firm. It is too late for that. Why? Surely if we explain. Explain what? That we are sorry we got caught. That we are sorry our actions have consequences? The ancient being shook her head. The humans did not leave because of the vote. They left because of what the vote revealed. They finally saw us as we truly are, and they wanted no part of it. Drathmok slammed his claw against his podium. This is ridiculous. They are one species. We are 23. They need us far more than we need them. Sovani looked at him with something that might have been pity. You truly believe that, do you not? You truly think that humanity has nothing to offer that we cannot replace? She paused. I wonder how long it will take before you learn otherwise. She turned and walked out of the chamber without another word. One by one, the elder counselors followed her. They did not speak. They did not argue. They simply left. Drathmok watched them go with contempt in his eyes. Cowards, he muttered. They will see. The humans will come crawling back within a month, begging for our help. But deep in the empty space where the human delegation had once sat, something felt wrong. The chairs stood silent, the platform stood bare, and the absence felt heavier than any presence ever had. And in the weeks that followed, the council would learn just how heavy that absence could be. 3 weeks passed, and the human borders stayed closed. Every day, ships from a dozen species flew to the edge of Earth space and sent messages asking to speak. Every day, they received the same automated reply. Earth appreciates your inquiry. We are currently unavailable. That was all. No anger, no accusations, no demands. Just polite empty words that said nothing and explained less. Drathmok treated the whole situation as a joke. He stood before the council and laughed about human weakness. He called them cowards. He said they would come crawling back within weeks, begging for forgiveness and desperate for the things that only the council could provide. They need our technology, he said confidently. They need our trade routes. They need our protection. Without us, they are nothing but a lonely species on a small planet in a dangerous galaxy. Many counselors nodded in agreement. They wanted to believe him. They wanted to believe that this was all just a tantrum, a temporary outburst that would pass soon enough. But the reports kept coming. And the reports told a different story. The first crisis hit the Morvani agricultural worlds. Human scientists had spent 20 years developing hybrid crops that could grow in Morvani soil. These crops fed 3 billion people. They were the backbone of the Morvani food supply, but the crops required careful management. The soil chemistry had to be monitored. The growing cycles had to be adjusted. The pest control systems had to be maintained. Human agronomists had done all of this work, quietly and efficiently. Without asking for thanks or praise, now the agronomists were gone. And no one knew how to replace them. Within 3 weeks, the first harvests began to fail. The yields dropped by 30%, then 40%, then 50%. The Morvani government sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for help. They offered money, resources, political favors. They offered anything the humans wanted. The automated reply came back. Earth appreciates your inquiry. We are currently unavailable. The Thashan medical ships faced their own disaster. Human doctors had volunteered for the most dangerous postings in the galaxy. They served on plague worlds where the air itself was poison. They worked in radiation zones where a single mistake could kill them. They operated on battlefields where bombs fell around them and soldiers died in their arms. No, other species would take those assignments. The work was too hard, too thankless, too deadly. But the humans did it anyway, year after year, because they believed that healing the sick was worth any risk. Now those stations were empty. The plague worlds had no doctors. The radiation zones had no medics. The battlefields had no surgeons. Patients who could have been saved were dying because no one was there to save them. The Thashan Medical Council sent a formal request to Earth, asking for the doctors to return. They promised better treatment, better pay, better respect. They apologized for past insults and begged for another chance. The automated reply came back. Earth appreciates your inquiry. We are currently unavailable. The Celestine monitoring network was the next to fall. Human engineers had maintained the deep space sensors that watched for threats coming from the outer darkness. It was boring work, lonely work, the kind of job that no one wanted and everyone forgot about until something went wrong. For 20 years, humans had done that job without complaint. They sat in tiny stations at the edge of nowhere, staring at screens full of data, watching for the first signs of danger. They did not ask for glory. They did not expect medals. They just did their duty, day after day, because someone had to do it. Now the stations were empty. The sensors were failing. Sector after sector went dark, and no one knew what was happening in those blind spots. 2 exploration ships disappeared in areas that should have been safe. A colony reported strange signals that no one could investigate. An enemy fleet could have been gathering just beyond the sensor range. And the Celestine would never know until it was too late. Grand Admiral Kethrix stood before the council and delivered his report in a voice that shook with frustration. We have lost coverage of 30% of our monitored space, he said. We have assigned new personnel to the stations, but they do not have the training or the patience. Half of them have already requested transfers. Then force them to stay, Drothmok said. I cannot force people to do work that they hate, Kethrix replied. The humans did it because they believed in service. They believed in duty. You cannot order someone to have beliefs. But the worst news came from the Corvan Empire's southern border. For 30 years, the Vrexian horde had been probing Corvan defenses. The Vrexians were monsters, pure and simple. They existed only to conquer and destroy. They felt no mercy, no pity, no remorse. They attacked without warning and retreated without reason. The only thing keeping them at bay was a fragile alliance of species working together to hold the line. And at the heart of that alliance were human military advisors. Human tacticians had designed the defense grid that protected the border. Human intelligence officers had mapped Vrexian movements and predicted their attacks. Human diplomats had maintained the secret negotiations that kept the alliance from falling apart. All of those humans were now gone. The Corvan military commander, General Throxen, sent a report to the council. His words were simple and frightening. Without human support, our defenses will fail within 18 months. The Vrexians will break through, and there will be nothing to stop them. Drothmok read the report and threw it aside. Lies, he growled. We do not need humans to defend our own territory. We have fought wars for 10,000 years. We know what we are doing. Do we? Vextari asked quietly. When was the last time we fought a war without human help? Drothmok did not answer. He could not answer because the truth was uncomfortable. The council had grown dependent on humanity without ever realizing it. The young species had taken on the jobs that no one else wanted. They had filled the gaps that no one else noticed. They had become the glue that held everything together, and now that glue was gone, Velric spoke into the silence. We should send a delegation to Earth, a real delegation, with authority to negotiate. Negotiate what? Vexthari asked. We have nothing they want. We already took everything we could take. Then we offer to give it back. We reverse the vote. We apologize. We do whatever it takes to bring them home. Shovani shook her ancient head. It is too late for that. Do you not understand? They are not angry with us. Anger would be easier. Anger means they still care what we think. But they have stopped caring. They looked at us and saw what we really are, and they decided that we are not worth the effort. The chamber was silent. We showed them that 40 years of sacrifice meant nothing, she continued. We showed them that no amount of service would ever make them our equals. And so they stopped serving. They stopped sacrificing. They stopped trying to earn something that we were never going to give them. She looked around the room at the assembled delegates, the leaders of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. We wanted them to know their place, she said softly. And now they do. They understand exactly where they stand with us. The question is whether we understand where we stand without them. No one had an answer, and somewhere beyond the silent border, humanity waited and said nothing at all. 2 months after the withdrawal, a single human ship appeared at the edge of Council space. Thought it was a small vessel, barely larger than a shuttle. It carried no weapons and made no threatening moves. It simply stopped at the border and sent a message, requesting permission to approach. The Council granted permission within minutes. 17 species had been waiting for any sign that humanity was ready to talk, and now that sign had finally come. Ships scrambled to escort the little vessel. Diplomats rushed to prepare welcoming ceremonies. Drathmok himself ordered his finest warriors to stand guard at the docking bay. But when the human ship landed and its door opened, only one person stepped out. She was a small woman with brown hair and tired eyes. Her name was Lisa Brennan, and she had been a mid-level cultural attaché in the human delegation for 3 years. She was not a general or an admiral. She was not a president or a prime minister. She was just an ordinary woman with an ordinary job, and she had come alone. The council was confused. They had expected a fleet, or at least a formal diplomatic team. Instead, they got one woman in a simple gray suit, carrying nothing but a small datapad. Lisa was escorted to the council chamber under heavy guard. Soldiers from a dozen species surrounded her, their weapons ready, their eyes watching her every move. They were not trying to protect her. They were making sure she could not escape. She did not seem to notice. She walked calmly through the great doors and into the chamber where the leaders of 23 civilizations waited in silence. The room was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high that it disappeared into shadow. The seats rose in circles around a central platform, filled with beings of every shape and size. Giants and insects, crystals and flames, creatures that defied description, and others that looked almost human, but were not. Lisa stepped onto the central platform and stood there, alone at the center of the galaxy's power. I am not here to negotiate, she said. Her voice was calm and clear. I am here to deliver a message, and then I will leave. Vexthari leaned forward. We will hear your message. Lisa nodded. She looked around the chamber, taking in the faces of the beings who ruled the stars. She did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She looked like someone who had finally understood something important and was now sharing that understanding with others. When humanity first reached the stars, she began, we were alone. We had no friends, no allies, no one to guide us. We made terrible mistakes. We fought wars with each other. We nearly destroyed our own planet. But we survived, and we learned, and eventually we found you. She paused, letting her words settle into the silence. We were so grateful. The Galactic Council seemed like everything we had dreamed of. A community of civilizations working together, sharing knowledge, building something greater than any single species could achieve. We wanted to be part of that dream. We wanted to help make it real. Her voice was steady, but something hard had entered her eyes. So we gave everything we had. Our scientists shared their research freely. Our doctors volunteered for missions that no one else would take. Our engineers built your stations and maintained your networks. Our soldiers held your borders and bled for your causes. We did all of this gladly, because we believed that service would earn us a place among you. She looked directly at Drathmok, and the great warrior shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We asked only one thing in return. We asked to be treated as equals, not as superiors. We knew we were young. We knew we had much to learn, but we wanted to be partners, not servants. We wanted to be members of the community we had served so faithfully. Lisa let the silence stretch for a long moment. Yesterday, you answered that request. 16 species voted to take our homes because we had grown too successful. Our representative asked 3 times for permission to speak, and 3 times he was denied. And when the vote was done, not one counselor approached him to explain what had happened, or to apologize, or even to say goodbye. She straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. So we left, not in anger. There is no profit in anger. We left because we finally understood the truth. We were never partners. We were never equals. We were servants who had forgotten their place, and the moment we became inconvenient, you reminded us. Vextari spoke quickly. That was a mistake. The council acted rashly. We can reverse the vote. We can make things right. No, Lisa said. You cannot. But surely, this was never about the vote. Lisa's voice cut through the High Counselor's words like a blade. The vote simply revealed what was always true. You do not see us as equals. You never have. You never will. And we cannot build a future with people who view us as lesser beings to be managed rather than partners to be respected. The chamber was utterly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Lisa continued, her voice calm but firm. We do not hate you. We do not want revenge. We are not planning to attack you or destroy you or make you suffer. That is not who we are. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of counselor after counselor. But we are done pretending. We are done hoping that if we just work a little harder, sacrifice a little more, give a little extra, you will finally accept us. You have made your position clear. We understand it now, and we are choosing to walk away. Drathmok found his voice. You need us. You cannot survive without our technology, our trade, our protection. Lisa smiled, and there was something sad in that smile. That is what you believe. Perhaps you are right. Perhaps we will fail without you. Perhaps we will struggle and suffer, and eventually come crawling back to beg for scraps from your table. She paused. Or perhaps you have underestimated us. Perhaps you have always underestimated us. Perhaps the species that survived nuclear war, that clawed its way out of extinction, that crossed the void between stars on ships made of hope and desperation, has more strength than you ever imagined. She turned to leave, then stopped. We will not close our borders forever. We will not seek revenge. But when we return to the galactic community, it will be on different terms. You will meet us as we truly are, not as the grateful children you imagined us to be. And you will have to decide whether that is something you can accept. Lisa walked toward the door. Her footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Wait, Giovanni called out. What will you do now? Where will you go? Lisa paused at the threshold. She looked back at the ancient being, and for a moment, Something like sympathy crossed her face. "We will do what we have always done," she said quietly. "We will survive. We will learn. We will grow. And when we are ready, we will return." She stepped through the door and was gone. Her ship departed within the hour. No one tried to stop her. No one knew what to say. And in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in silence and wondered what they had done. The empty seats stared back at them, and they had no answers to give. 10 years passed, and the galaxy changed. The Rexian horde broke through the Corvan southern border in the 3rd year. Without human tactical support, the defense grid that had held for decades collapsed in a matter of months. The Corvan Empire lost 40 star systems before a desperate counterattack finally stopped the advance. Millions died. Entire worlds burned. Drathmok never spoke of it. He never admitted that the humans had been right. He simply grew quieter, and his laughs became less frequent, and the fire in his eyes slowly died. The Marvani agricultural crisis deepened into full famine by year 4. 2 billion citizens had to be relocated to other worlds in the largest refugee movement in Council history. Families were torn apart. Communities that had existed for centuries vanished overnight. The Marvani home worlds, once green and fertile, became gray wastelands where nothing would grow. The Celestin monitoring network never fully recovered. 3 exploration missions were lost to hazards that the old sensors would have detected easily. A colony of 50,000 vanished without a trace, destroyed by something that came out of the dark while no one was watching. And through all of this, the human borders remained closed. Ships still flew to the edge of Earth space, still sent their pleading messages, still received the same polite, empty response. "Earth appreciates your inquiry. We are currently unavailable." Some counselors grew angry. They demanded action, punishment, war. But wiser voices pointed out that humanity had broken no laws. They had simply stopped helping. They had withdrawn to their own space and left the Council to face the consequences of its choices. It was hard to declare war on someone for minding their own business. Other counselors grew hopeful as the years passed. Surely humans would forgive them eventually. Surely they would forget the insults and the injuries. Surely time would heal the wounds. But the borders stayed closed. And the silence stretched on. Then, in the 10th year, everything changed. The vessel appeared at the edge of Council space without warning. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was massive, larger than most space stations, but it moved with the grace of a dancer. Its hull shimmered with colors that shifted and flowed like living light. Sensors could not identify the materials it was made from. Scanners could not penetrate its defenses. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. A transmission came through on every frequency. "This is the Earth Vessel Constellation. We request permission to address the Galactic Council." Permission was granted before the message finished playing. The human delegation that arrived in the Council chamber looked different from the ones who had left 10 years before. They carried themselves with a quiet confidence that seemed to fill the room. Their clothing was simple but elegant, made from materials that seemed to glow faintly in the light. They moved like people who knew exactly who they were and exactly what they were worth. At their head was a man named Kevin Park. He had been a junior aide in the old delegation, young and eager and full of hope. Now his hair was touched with gray, and his eyes held something new. Something that had been forged in 10 years of silence and struggle and growth. He stepped onto the central platform where Lisa Brennan had stood a decade ago, and he looked around at the assembled delegates without fear or anger or hope. He looked at them like someone studying a problem that he had already solved. "Counselors," he said, "humanity has spent the last decade in reflection. We looked at what we had built with you and what we had failed to build. We looked at ourselves and asked hard questions about who we wanted to be. He raised his hand, and holographic displays appeared around the chamber. Images filled the air, showing wonders that made the counselors gasp. There were cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants, impossible structures that defied everything the council knew about engineering. There were ships that moved faster than light without using the old, dangerous jump drives. There were medical technologies that could cure diseases the council had thought incurable. There were weapons that made the Corvan war machines look like children's toys. And there were other species, beings that the council had dismissed as too primitive to matter. Races that had been ignored or exploited or forgotten. They stood beside the humans in those images, working together, building together, growing together. We discovered something important during our years alone, Kevin continued. We've been so focused on earning your approval that we forgot to become ourselves. We limited our growth to avoid frightening you. We hid our innovations to seem less threatening. We made ourselves smaller to fit into the space you had designated for us. He smiled, and there was no bitterness in it. Only peace. We stopped doing that. We became who we were always meant to be. And we found friends who valued us for that, not in spite of it. Vexthari spoke carefully. What do you want from us? We want what we always wanted, Kevin replied. Friendship, partnership, a place in the community of civilizations. We are willing to share what we have learned. We are willing to help rebuild what has been broken. We are willing to work together toward a better future. He paused. But the terms must be different. Humanity will not sit in the junior seats. We will not be denied voice in debates that concern us. We will not accept votes on our territories without our consent. We will be treated as equals, or we will not be treated with at all. Drathmok stirred in his seat. His voice was quieter than it used to be, broken by years of defeat and loss. And if we refuse? Kevin looked at the old warrior with something that might have been pity. Then we will wish you well, and we will go our own way. We do not need you to survive. We do not need you to thrive. We have proven that over the last 10 years. He spread his hands. We hope to walk this path together. We still hope for that. But we will walk it regardless of what you decide. The only question is whether you want to walk with us. The chamber fell into silence. The counselors looked at each other, at the holographic images still floating in the air, at the humans who stood before them with quiet strength. It was Elder Shovani who moved first. She rose slowly, her ancient form glowing brighter than it had in years. I move that the council accept humanity's terms without condition, she said. And I move that we formally apologize for the failures of the past. The vote was called. One by one, the species of the galaxy made their choice. It was unanimous. Kevin Park nodded slowly. He walked to the front row of the chamber, to the seats reserved for the oldest and most respected species, and he sat down among them. No one objected. No one even thought to object, and as the session continued, as plans were made and promises were spoken, something had changed in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The humans were back, but they were not the same humans who had left. They were not grateful children hoping to be accepted. They were not servants waiting for scraps of approval. They were equals. They had always been equals. It just took the galaxy 10 years of suffering to figure that out. And in the seats where Ambassador Carter had once sat silent and patient, Kevin Park looked out at the stars that humanity had claimed as its own, and he smiled. They were home. And this time, they were staying on their own terms.